Work-life balance. It's at the top of everybody's list of desirable career benefits. Now, the Naveen Jindal School of Management offers students help on how to plan for this in their own lives. A podcast, formerly called the Yet Another MBA GOAT podcast, greatest of all time, naturally, has been rebranded as Between Business and Life. An MBA student today, a balanced professional tomorrow. It's another way that the Jindal School seeks to prepare students to become effective leaders in their future roles. The podcast offers new episodes monthly, featuring thought leaders who have achieved success in their careers, as well as an excellent work-life balance. Each episode is designed to equip students with the knowledge of business trends while inspiring them to manage both business and life. Now here's Lisa Shatz, Assistant Dean for the MBA Programs at the Jindal School. Take it away, Lisa.
Hey, you guys. Welcome to another episode of Between Business and Life. Today we are talking with Professor Jeff Price, who is with the Bass School of Arts, Humanities, and Technology here at UT Dallas. He is Associate Professor of Game Development, AR/VR Technology, which stands for Augmented Reality and Virtual Reality. Originally from Oklahoma City, but has taught really all over, and not just taught, he actually has gone to multiple schools where he's done what he has here, which is built out a virtual reality lab at a lot of schools, mostly in the South, Oklahoma, in Virginia, in Texas, and South Carolina, large schools, small schools, public schools, private schools, but always basically starting multimedia and graphic curriculum. So did I fit everything in there?
Yeah, yes, you did. And I'm traveling through my mind of all those experiences. And it was a lot of different experiences. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but it's a lot of different experiences with each of those entities, and the struggles and successes,
Yeah. So let's start off with the question that I asked you when we first met, which is the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality.
And that's a question I get a lot. As we move into these immersive technologies, there is systems that will be fully immersive. And so when you put the headset on in a VR environment, you're replacing everything that you're seeing visually in the real world with everything constructed in the virtual world. So if I'm playing a video game, I put myself into that world, and I don't really see the outside world. In augmented reality, it's more like Iron Man's helmet. When he looks at people and information starts popping up around them, that's more augmented reality. It's augmenting information through the internet or through the headset that allows you to understand. If I looked at a table, I could look at maybe all the ingredients that I have in my kitchen, and then it would give me a recipe based on seeing all those ingredients. And so it's a little bit of a mix between overlaying information onto the real world. You also get into some things, and I could even say that I'm a professor of XR, and XR is extended reality. So a lot of people will use things like VR, AR, and the new terminology is XR. Mm-hmm. And so XR would be, how do you take three-dimensional objects or information and put them into the real world seamlessly where they don't look like they're not part of the real world? So taking, for example, a virtual coffee cup and putting it on the table and seeing the shadow of that coffee cup on the table in the right angle and everything else. So so you have virtual reality where you're completely immersed. You have augmented reality, which is an overlay, and then XR, which is the mix of the two, or some people call it mixed reality.
So let's start with virtual reality. That's the one most people know. When I think about virtual reality, most of what I think about is gaming. But of course, this is a business school. So jumping ahead of gaming to practical applications within the business world, the only one that comes to mind for me that I think I've heard a lot about is training for military or simulations for jet pilots, things like that. But I know it extends way, way, way beyond that. Can you give one of the more common practical applications of VR or AR that I maybe don't know about?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's ironic because I teach a virtual reality class here at UTD, and we cover the history of VR. And most people don't realize that VR really started with those practical applications and only moved into video games. So it really started off with training astronauts and training pilots. And so it was a way to augment their training so that we could train more pilots for the Air Force or things like that. So people at MIT and the HIT lab at Washington, they were doing things, for that sort of visualization for the military. And that's really where the genesis of that became. And then just later on, it moved into, in the 80s, there was you could go to an arcade and there was a virtual reality game called Virtuality. And it was really the first time people would experience virtual reality. You would get in a pod and put a headset on that was all attached, and you could play a little bit of a game here and there. And then I started doing virtual reality, teaching virtual reality in the 90s. A person named Jaron Lanier created a system called the RB2. And it was the first time that industry could buy. It wasn't in a lab at a university. It was really just something that a business could buy and put into and start to do visualization, things like that. So the car industry really picked that up, designing automobiles, safety, doing all that design. And so that was, virtual reality kind of really grew in the 90s. It sort of died out for the consumer market, and it really was brought back into architecture and automobile and even process control and things like that. There's systems out there where, if a robot is welding, you obviously can't be in that spot to watch that happen, but people can don a VR goggle in another room and make sure that it's all being done correctly. And so using thermal cameras and things like that. So there is a lot of VR that's happening that you just don't see on an everyday basis, especially in industry. There's a lot of what we call digital twinning, where people are managing warehouse inventory and doing all these kinds of stuff all with a digital twin, and they may be in Tokyo and the facility may be in Idaho, and they're using virtual reality to watch all that inventory happen and things like that. So there's a lot of examples of that. And another area is health, telemedicine, therapy. A lot of research has been done to help people overcome phobias and a lot of other things, and traumatic brain injury and things like that using virtual reality. And they've also found in medical field where people that have been burned, has some severe burns, if they put them in a VR headset and they show them they're in the Arctic, then their body actually cools off.
That is fascinating.
So there's a lot of industries. Another thing that's happening right now is a lot of places are once again doing digital twins of, say, a port or a dock, and so they're watching from and doing all the tracking of all the ships as they're coming in, all the inventory on the ship, how efficient they can offload all the inventory that's on these ships, and then even where they're going to be warehoused and how that's all being managed, and other ports and how all the ships are coming together. So there's so many applications that VR can have a remote presence, and that's really kind of what we're looking at in terms of business. Is how do we manage all this data, put it into a visualization system, and then be able to look at that and make decisions that are business related.
Right.
Grocery stores are doing it too, as for doing market research on where things should be on shelves.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on. You just don't normally see it.
And so this is happening somewhat. This is happening regularly. This is how much, if I were to go to the supermarket, what are the odds that any random supermarket is already doing it? Is it already infiltrated in those examples, or is it just getting started?
No, it's been around and it's happening every day. And there's a certain number of factors that have made it even more prevalent, which is faster speeds. The tools themselves are cheaper now because of headsets that have been coming out. They're better, they're faster, they're cheaper. 5G, there's a lot of technologies that are happening, just like the cell phone. When you originally got a cell phone, it was a big bag phone, right? And to bring some sort of ROI to what was happening in the business world, basically they had to have a lot of people out there that were selling, that couldn't, they would have to go to a telephone. They would have to stop what they were doing and do all that. It was more efficient for them to have a phone in their car, which, it may have been a huge bag phone, but then that drove all of the innovation that would happen to where we have cell phones now on a consumer level.
Right.
Is because all that industry drove that. And so the same thing happens with VR, is that once all these things that are happening, is starting to drive the headsets to be smaller and things like that. So
if I asked you back then what the future looked like for AR and VR, you would have told me all the things you just said.
Yeah.
So asking you today, what are the things that we're going to see in 10 or 20 years that aren't here yet?
Well, one of the things that I think, if I look back at VR back in the day, my first system was about $250,000 in the 90s. So that was quite an investment for our university. I had a room full of 20 students to use one machine. Now I teach VR 25 years later, and I have a headset for every one of my students that they can take home and use and do their homework and things like that. I think 25 years from now, we're going to start to see more integration and the form factor of the headsets being different. So it wouldn't be this big bulky headset, just like that big bag phone. It's going to be a material that you put on your glasses, or it might be a contact lens that you put in. Those things are already being produced right now. There's researchers working on micro technologies that would then allow us to have a different form factor. And so I think once that we can get to people wearing a pair of glasses and seeing all that information coming through, either in AR or VR, I think that's the future. Remember the person I said that started the company Virtuality? Mm-hmm. He's actually started a new company called Meta Materials 20, 30, 40 years later. Mm-hmm. And now he's gone from these sort of virtual reality systems to now making that film that becomes conductive to information coming through it, almost like a monitor through just a really thin film.
Explain how you do, how would I use that?
Well, once again, it would be part of your glasses. So, just how you scan the internet or anything like that. Computer vision connected with AI, connected with your glasses. I mean, you could look at something in a restaurant and identify everything that's in the meal, mm-hmm. and if you have allergies to it, on a personal level, that's a simple one. When you get to how does it work in the industry? Somebody that, say, maybe is an IT consultant could go in and look at how all the Wi-Fi is moving around the room, just visualizing that in their glasses. Wow. You can't see that visually, but we can predict how those waves are moving throughout the room, and it could be all color coded, and where cold spots are in terms of not having access to Wi-Fi and all that, and where the strength signal is and things like that. There's cities that are converting all their CAD files of everything that gets produced. So when, for example, not inside your house, but actually outside, instead of tearing up an entire area of road to find one little part, now they have those blueprints and they can look virtually through the concrete and see where those fittings might be or whatever. And so it's much more efficient to cut off a little area, but that's already being done now. So
that is amazing.
They're partnering with companies. There's a couple of technologies we use, Unity 3D, and there's another one called Unreal Engine. And so those are real-time game engines that are being used to take in, and there's technologies that you can add onto those game engines to allow you to use AutoCAD and things. So, the thing I'm most excited about is really AI, and how we do a lot of experimenting in our lab with generative AI. So I run a lab here at UTD called the VAST Lab, and generative AI, I don't know if you're a fan of Star Trek, but if you went into the holodeck, you could say, okay, I want to be on a 14th century clipper ship as a pirate, and I'm fighting, the Empire, and so suddenly you're in the middle of the ocean and you're on a ship, and you're manning all the guns and things like that. And so that is all going to be doable. I mean, that's almost doable now, that I can generate images based on themes and based on ideas that I prompt that give me three-dimensional spaces. Mm-hmm. So in 25 years, it's going to be really nuts. I mean, I think it'll be really fun to see where that technology goes. I mean, a lot of people think of AI as, Chat GPT and they're writing a paper, but it could be, maybe I say, okay, I want a movie about the Civil War, and I want it all interactive, and it would just be produced.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that is, to me, very liberating for a lot of people that are not artists, or they could go in and generate stories or talk about stories and share those with other people. And that is all being done and then sent through the headset, and people could witness it through their eyes.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Or their ears. I mean, VR is also spatial in terms of audio as well. So there's a lot of things that go on in terms of video and audio. So.
Yeah, well, we've seen how Hollywood has reacted to the AI part of that. I'm not sure everybody's on board.
Yeah.
But I guess new technology is disruptive, right? There's usually someone out there that's not happy until it kind of becomes an everyday thing.
Yeah. I think just understanding information. Recently, my mother went through a stroke, and being able to, if I could go to the hospital and it's an abstract idea, and unless I study medicine, I don't really know how that works or what's going on. And being able to use virtual reality or augmented reality to understand that and witness that would have been very helpful when I was there. And it would have been, something that I would be understanding what she was going through. So it's an enhancement to your life. It gives you more information so that you can understand the world a little bit better.
Yeah. So you showed me a really interesting example of, I guess it would be VR. And so I just wanted to share that with our listeners. It was the, I don't even know what you call it. It was the tour that you gave me of your building while I was sitting in my building. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So the word metaverse is something that's been thrown around a lot, especially after Meta, the company that makes the Oculus and makes Facebook and all that. They renamed themselves Meta. And then they have an online world called Horizon Worlds. There's other ones and they primarily own that entity. And if you want to be in it, you have to register and, all that. There are other entities out there, just like web servers. And there's one called Decentraland, and they make you buy a little plot of land and then you can build whatever you want to on it. And there's probably hundreds of them now. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there wasn't that many. Now there's probably more and more and more. There's metaverse sites that are all industry related. So, hospitality companies like Hilton or whatever, they may hold big conferences in the metaverse with all the different employees coming. Obviously, it's really hard to bring everybody to a location. If they can get into a shared space in VR and talk and have meetings, that's sort of the purpose of the metaverse. There's also websites out there like VR Chat where kids get in there and they're doing graffiti all over the walls, and they can, be different avatars, and they can be a big banana if they want to. There's also metaverse sites that are educational. So a lot of universities are coming online and remaking their brick and mortar buildings in the virtual space. And so the dean of our school once wanted to do that. And so the VAST Lab, we recreated the Edith O'Donnell ATEC building, and we could use it in a lot of different ways. We could use it as an online tour. So I could actually have a pre-recorded tour where somebody would log in. And one of the great things about the metaverse is that you don't have to have a lot of expensive equipment. You could have a Quest that you buy over at Best Buy. You could get in and then be in VR in an environment. You could also do it on your desktop. You could look at it through a monitor, or I could even log on my phone and go through a building through my phone. So that technology shift is really great, that I can go from probably the lowest tech that everybody has to I could be in the most expensive headset and have a little bit of a different experience, but still we could be all in a shared space. So in this virtual version of our building, we could have tours where students from all over the world, I just gave a tour from a student from India today, in our building. I could do that all virtually if we wanted, if that person was still in their country and they wanted to see our building. We could do performances. So we have singers and things like that. So we can actually have a setup that allows real life performances to be digitized and then witnessed by everybody in that space. So you can have in spatial.io, which is the website that we use. You can go to spatial.io. You can look up UTD campus, and there our building is. Eventually, I would love to have the entire UTD campus there.
Right.
So somebody can really get the experience of everything that's going on. But you could do that. Students could do clubs. They could, we have the building digitized, so students could actually take that and make games with it. So there's so many things. Once that you have that digital twin of something, there's so many opportunities that you can do with that, there's in terms of storytelling or events, or we have our big auditorium in there. So you could do presentations. You can actually do PowerPoint presentations in the metaverse. Mm-hmm. So you could hold a class, and, if And we actually did that a year ago. We worked with a school in Germany, and they do fashion textile design. And so my students took all their designs for 3 different brands, Gucci, I think Nike, and another brand, Burberry, I think. And we created online displays or point of purchase stores, that somebody could have come and experience. And for Nike, you could play actually a little version of basketball and then look at all the shoes that they have and things like that. So that was a really cool experience for my students to work, with another school in another country, but also do that all through the metaverse.
Yeah. And just for people who are having trouble visualizing what that looks like, I'll talk about my experience getting a tour of your building. So basically, I have an avatar. I think in our case, I was the male and you were female.
That's right.
Because we didn't actually set up.
It doesn't matter in the metaverse. You can be anything you want.
We were walking side by side through the building.
Yeah.
Where I was controlling my walking forward because I'm not young. It took me a little bit to get the hand movements right to move forward and not keep going in circles. And you were walking next to me, but you would say, let's turn right into here. And I'd follow you. We went into the auditorium. I was on the stage. Walked through, looked at some classrooms, stuff like that. At some point, I think somebody else walked by us.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So if somebody just happened to get in there, I guess we could have turned at them and said, hi, can I help you or whatever. Yeah. So really just like if I walked over there.
It's really great because I actually met somebody in one of our metaverse sites. We did another one for a high school up in Oklahoma called Tulsa Union, and they have a brand new stadium. And so we recreated the stadium in the metaverse. And so all of the people that have gone to that school that are in Alaska and the military, and maybe they're around the world, on Friday nights, they can come to that stadium. On the big screen is the football game. They can play games in the middle of the field. They can run around and see. You can purchase things, and there's actually a concession stand. So if you want to buy merch that gets sent to you or mailed to you, all that's possible. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very interactive way to create a space. So the first things that always happen are museums. Everybody creates a metaverse museum. And so you can put artwork on the walls. But really, it can be informational spaces. It can be learning spaces. It could be just lounging and watching a movie together. There's a lot of stuff that can happen in VR in terms of social. I'm excited about the future of augmented reality being incorporated into the metaverse. So somebody might be totally virtual, but then I might be just walking down the street, but I'm also sharing some, maybe we were walking together in the building, the virtual building. I'm excited about maybe the future where your avatar is walking with me down the street, like I'm walking by, you and we're talking and you're sitting in your office. So I think that's the future of communication and interaction, and companies that
certainly seems very Star Trek-y.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think companies that get on board with that and they start to delve into creating experiences for their customers or their employees, I think they're going to benefit from it.
This episode is brought to you by the UT Dallas MBA Programs, top ranked nationally and in Texas. The UT Dallas MBA combines a robust core with 13 concentrations. You have an option to add a second master's degree. Your choices for that include 5 STEM designated programs. The MBA program has full-time, part-time, online, and other formats. They give you flexibility to fit your MBA education into your busy schedule. The skills and training you will receive are exactly what top employers are looking for. For more information, visit us online at mba.utdallas.edu.
If I were to say today, hey, I would love for you to make a metaverse out of our building so that we could bring people into the business school, how much work would that take?
Yeah, that's a good question. And first, I need to give my students who work at my lab some props because I have a lot of really talented ATech students that have been trained by some of the best professors, in gaming at our school here. And so we have about 15 to 18 students working at any particular time when they're not going to other classes and stuff like that are working, and even some alumni. Just to go back real fast, I met somebody in a metaverse site and we were talking, and I said, hey, where do you live? And they said, Dallas. So I'm imagining this person being, from somewhere else, and they're literally right down the street. So they actually now are coming to our lab and is part of our lab. So I would have never met that person. I don't know that person, but now we have a shared experience, and that, led us to. So I don't think it replaces interpersonal communication. I think it augments it. But to go back to your question, like how much does it cost, or what time frame? So we had about 18 students working on this building, and it's called a pipeline. When you're making a game, you have people that do the initial visualizations or the plan of it. They make almost like blueprints, like an architect would. Then you have people that model, that texture. So every chair that's in there, every pencil on the tables, I think we had 19 or 20 different types of chairs that some interior designer had done when they made that building, So we had to replicate all that, all the floor textures, all the one of my things is I wanted to get everything, even like fire alarms and sensors that are on the ceiling, because all that gives you that sense of immersion when you're doing that. And so you have modelers, you have texture artists, you have level designers, people that are making sure the level works, and then people they call them set dressing. So you do where all those chairs go and all that. So it took eventually probably about 6 months to 8 months to do, with those students working part-time. I mean, obviously we could do it faster if they were working full-time every day. I had a couple of former students that worked on it as well, and they worked longer hours, but yeah, it's a process, and getting all those pieces together. I think we came down to having 4,000 assets that we had to put all over the building. And there are ways in which, if you get a CAD file in a perfect way, that can save some time. You can convert that into the problem with game engines right now is that we're still not at a processing power where it can do gazillions of polygons at the same time. So we actually have to do what's called polygon reduction or decimation. So we have to take a building, and architecture buildings, even the switch on the wall that turns the lights on and off would have thousands of polygons just on that little switch, because they're only seeing parts of it at a time. When you have to bring this into a game engine and in real time shadow it, light it, have somebody navigating and then have that transfer to 50 people, it's got to be a little bit thinner in terms of its footprint. So one of the processes that we have to do on everything that we're making is take something that has a lot of information and make it into what we call game ready assets. And we had 4,000 of those. So we had just students just generating, and it was I think it was good for them to see that we have several classes over in our department where they can work in what's called game lab, and they can make a game in a group. So that multi-development kind of process is a really good thing for them to see. Oh, I need to make something and pass it off to you to texture it, and then that gets passed off over there. And they start to learn that pipeline very, very well. And so that was one of my goals, too, for creating a building, is just doing that. But and then you also get into, you have to almost be a landscape artist, an architect, creating flowers and creating trees and how to make that look real. And they get to learn a little bit about architecture and landscape design, just trying to create that building.
So just like technology, you talked about starting big and gets smaller over time. Usually doing those kind of things takes a lot of work, and over time becomes more efficient. You can do it faster. Do you see where in the future something like that would be significantly more efficient because of additional tools that are built in?
Oh, absolutely. And in the fall, I'm teaching 3D Modeling 1, and we'll be teaching techniques to do that fit by hand. That may be all AI in the future. You may make a model and just say, hey, clean this model up and make it game ready. Or it might be that the game engines get to the point where processing power really doesn't matter. Like we're getting faster and faster and better processors. So it might be where I can bring in gazillion poly objects. One of the latest technologies in Unreal Engine is called Nanite. And Nanite lets you have, the closer you get to something, the more detailed it becomes. The farther you're away from it, the computer figures that out and makes it lower poly. So, all these things are coming to a peak, and we're on that pathway. And then at some point, things will be so realistic that you won't know the difference between reality and non-reality.
I think that you mentioned that there's a class in ATech that would kind of talk more about the business side of
We
do.
We have a couple of different classes that are more related to the estimating and production and scheduling and having business students working with artists is a very fantastic thing.
Right.
You know, having the plan of production and when those things need to be done and how to interface with a client and get change orders and things like that. A lot of times we don't always have the opportunity in our classes to teach those things. We do have classes that they can specifically take, but some students, you know, one of the things that my students in the VAST lab always love to see me talk about is working with a client and coming up with a proposal and coming up with, you know, a statement of work and what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know, coming up with a pro forma and all those things those are, you know, really abstract ideas.
Yeah.
You know, to like one of the biggest questions is how do you estimate your time, your hourly rate?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's probably pretty easy for a business student.
Absolutely.
You know, for an artist, it's like I've seen a lot of artists put, you know, 200, 300 hours into something and sell it for $20. You know, and it's like,
I'll take that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fantastic artwork. And, you know, they just don't, they need to learn that. And that's part of where I think my role here is to help. And most of our professors, fortunately, have a very professional background. They've all worked in the industry, or a lot of them have worked in the industry. So they bring that knowledge of estimating and time tracking and stuff like that to the table. But having somebody that's what they've studied and what they've done and how to maximize that is such a positive thing in our team, you know, and as well as even on the proposal side, you know, just having somebody that knows how to make a strong proposal and make it talk about all the things that a business would need to talk about to make a decision to spend the money, you know, that is something that is very much needed in what we do.
Yeah. And certainly we teach tons of that over here because we send a lot of people to consulting firms where they have to know that day one. Well, I had a bunch of questions that we were talking so much I didn't even need to look at, so that's good. But based on time, I think we need to get on to the part about work-life balance.
Yeah.
So we try to bring in words of wisdom for younger folks who are kind of dealing with the beginning of their career and figuring out how to balance that. Can you talk a little bit about, especially in the world you talk about, I think about, okay, I've got this project, there's 4,000 assets. You could technically sit there for months and months and never feel like you're done. There's always something else. So how do you make sure that you do get up and finish at some time during the day?
Yeah, the artistic process is definitely organic and it's ongoing, and nothing is ever, I always tell my students, you know, nothing's ever finished. You're just getting to the point where you know, it's due, you know, and so learning to balance your time and learning to do the things that you need to do, be creative, and being creative on demand is not always easy. And so a lot of artists, they deal with a lot of struggles like procrastination and things like that when you have an artistic block, it's really hard to get up and just do. You know, if I need to make a widget, that's one thing, but when you have to kind of throw your mind into it and you're not really feeling it, it sometimes can be something that locks you up. But I have a great story. So there's two lumberjacks and they get up every morning at the same time and they get off work at the same time, but they go and they do their work and they get up and start, you know, chopping trees down or whatever they're doing. And they're doing that all day long. And then one of the lumberjacks, about halfway through the day, leaves for an hour and comes back and produces more than the person that has been there all day, and just constantly week by week and month by month. Finally, the second lumberjack says, I've got to ask you, what are you doing? I'm here longer. I work harder and you're still out producing me. And even you leave for an hour. What are you doing during that time? And the other lumberjack looks at him and says, I'm going and sharpening my axe. And that's the thing, is that we don't really realize that, you know, we get into habit of just doing stuff and we don't look at what new technology brings. My dad used to always say, work work smarter, not harder. And that's the kind of thing that with our technologies and things, a lot of people are good at something, but it's really hard to keep innovating and keep learning new things. I'm in my 50s now, and it's harder and harder to motivate myself to learn new things, new technologies, but it's critical for what I do. I always joke that if I were to do it all over again, I might have been just a painting teacher, because painting doesn't change. There's no paintbrush 2.0. It's pretty much what it was since Da Vinci, But with this, I mean, it's almost revolutionary every year, especially with the way AI has changed things. It's really hard to stay on top of everything. And, there's a certain amount of time that you have to do just chopping wood. You have to get in there and make things and be relevant, and then go and learn things, and then do things, and then learn things, and then do things. And then if you want to have a business on top of that, suddenly you throw selling in there. Mm-hmm. So you're doing, you're learning, you're selling. You're doing, you're learning, you're selling. And so taking time to relax or have a hobby or to unwind or sharpen your axe a little bit is always super important. I think for all artists, I have to tell my students to go home at night. They're at the lab working, and they're used to playing games all night long and doing video games. And I have to say, this is something that's going to burn you out if you don't go home. I understand you can drink a monster drink and you can stay here till 5 a.m, but that's not going to be good for you in the long run.
Right.
I'm the example of that. I've done that my whole life. And, finally I had to get to the point where I'm like, man, sleep is super important. And that recharges your batteries, and that makes you more, I think, a better learner, a better thinker, a better decision maker.
Yeah. And like you said, on the creative side, to keep the creative juices flowing.
Yeah, because every artist it's not if, it's when. They're going to hit a stump. They're going to be things are going to happen in their lives, that are tragic, or they're going to break up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or, a loved one or whatever. And that can be derailing in terms of a creative process. And so you have to have strategies to be able to get back up and start riding the bike again if you fall off. And, it's not always easy. Sometimes I've been where I, just been like, man, I don't know what I need to do here. And so I'm a big list maker. So I start writing lists and checking those boxes off and taking breaks and things like that.
That's awesome. Anything else you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask a question about?
AI is going to change the world, especially average people that are not trained to do something, to be able to do things that they weren't trained to do. I love working on cars. I have a 77 Trans Am. I have a 1958 Ford Fairlane 500. I have a 1946 Chevy truck. I was not alive when they made those cars. Mm-hmm. But to be able to put a pair of glasses on and go look and raise up the hood and be able to change the spark plugs interactively with my glasses, a pair of, say, augmented reality glasses would be like the coolest thing in the world to be able to do, or learn, learn a skill immediately. Mercedes-Benz and BMWs are very technical machines. It would be awesome if I could have my glasses identify that engine and then show me how to repair it.
Right.
Think how much money you would save or be able to do if you weren't always dependent on some other service.
Expert.
Yeah, expert, right, exactly. I think AI is going to bring that expertise in combination with visualization to the masses.
Well, maybe what everybody needs to do who's listening is think about that. What is the one thing that you would like to be your example? Like, if there's anything you could use that VR technology for and the AI technology to help you with something that you do, and then write it down on a piece of paper, stick it on your fridge, and see how many years it is in the future that all of a sudden it's like, I can go buy the glasses that allow me to do that XYZ.
Yeah. I think mine would be, learn to pilot a rocket ship, be an astronaut and learn how to do all the controls of that. So that would be mine.
I'd have to think about what mine would be. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff. I know I'm learning a language right now, and people are always telling me, oh, but they have all this technology. And that's a bad example because I'm sad that technology is there and somebody else could be just as effective without going through all the classes of learning the language. So sometimes you want the old school way.
Yeah. I want to put an asterisk beside that. They've learned that people that learn in VR languages learn half as amount. They took 2 classes and they had them learn, I think, Chinese. Mm-hmm. And One class did it sort of a traditional way with books and the audio recordings. The other class did it all immersively in VR, and they were doing it inside of a train station, and they had to get in China from outside. They had to come up, get out of the train, get there, and get some money and stuff like that. The people that did it in VR learned in 6 months, where it took the other group a year and a half to do it right.
Wow.
So
I'm in the wrong class.
It's results, right? That's the big question now is it better for a pilot to learn and have 200 hours of time to learn something and have that certification? Or could we train a pilot using VR, and if they can master it in 50 hours or 75 hours and not 200, are they as certified as the person that has all those hours in the plane?
Well, I guess I would argue, what could they learn in the additional 150 hours that they have?
Yeah, but if they're both passing the test,
right?
That's what that's the issue, is that how are we using this, and how this certification, when people are learning so much faster, if they do it this other way, this virtual way.
It goes on and on. It's pretty fascinating. Professor Jeff Price, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for your time, and I could talk about this all day.
Me too. Thanks for listening to Between Business and Life, brought to you by the UT Dallas MBA Programs. To learn more about how an MBA from the Naveen Jindal School of Management can help you develop the skills and connections you need to live your best life, visit us online at mba.utdallas.edu.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Between Business and Life. Join us online at betweenbusinessandlife.com to find episode notes, links, and more. Be sure to subscribe to Between Business and Life on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app. If you like what you hear, please leave a 5-star review. That will help spread the word about the podcast and UT Dallas MBA programs. To learn more about the UT Dallas MBA programs, visit us online at mba.utdallas.edu.